Hi everybody. I wanted to go over some basics of vRealize Orchestrator to help you all get started. The great thing about Orchestrator is it's been around for many years, and it's available for free as long as you have vCenter. You already have Orchestrator, so you can use it. I think that the fact that it's kind of an advanced programming style scripting language with some GUI has put a lot of people off from using it over the years, but I found it to be an extremely powerful tool that can orchestrate and automate a great deal of your infrastructure. A couple things that I wanted to illustrate as we go into this around the scriptable tasks. If you look at Orchestrator and you go to the built-in workflows, you can see on here quite a bit of built-in workflows that are included with here, including a lot of vCenter based workflows. We'll take a quick look at some of these. A great example here would be the add port group to distributed virtual switch. That's a pretty common task. With this you can automate it and do it. So as you look at this, everything inside of vRealize Orchestrator is a workflow, and every workflow can be drag and dropped into larger workflows. So they are really components or modular, and those can form larger workflows, smaller workflows, anything you need to do. Every workflow has a schema as shown here, which is the steps that it takes. If you look at this schema, it has a scriptable task with some sort of scripting language information in there. In this case, all the scripting language inside of vRealize Orchestrator is JavaScript. So you can see it actually gives you the JavaScript code that it's doing here. And then it has a wait task, which is something to wait for something to happen. And then another scriptable task that returns the results, and then those are outputted. That's essentially how every single one of these solutions work. So as you can see, the scriptable tasks become a key component of vRealize Orchestrator workflows. In order to do this, we're going to go ahead and create a new workflow, and that'll allow me to illustrate some of the challenges that are present in vRealize Orchestrator. You create a new workflow by right-clicking on a location and selecting New Workflow. You'll give it a name. Mine's going to be called Test. And then it loads up this. There's lots of things that happen here. We've got a general tab where we've got names, versioning, an owner, different behaviors, and a description, as well as attributes. Attributes are hard-coded elements that are going to be passed into scriptable tasks or into various tasks or workflows. They are hard-coded, and when you add them, you're given the opportunity to give it a name, a type, and there's lots of built-in types. Be careful with these. String is what it sounds like. You have a choice between a single or an array of that type, so you could do an array of numbers, an array of strings, an array of anything. There's also built-in VMware models, like you could do a VM folder or an array of VM folders, or a VC virtual machine, which is a virtual machine with all intended information that goes along with it, like its name and its size and all that stuff. For today, we're going to leave this as string. You have the opportunity to hard code a value or later change that value. Here, this value can be changed at any time through the workflow. We're going to go ahead and insert the value of Bob, and then there's a description to be used. You also have inputs. These are things that are required to come into the workflow in order for it to work correctly. They are either passed by other workflows into it or inputted by the consumer when they're running the workflow. Outputs are information that comes out of this workflow and can be fed into other workflows or outputted to screen or do various things like that. Schema is where we actually design our workflow and how we want it to work. And over here on the left, you see there is a number of different logic pieces available, like decision points, decision activities, user interaction, waiting timers, end workflow, workflow note, or throw exceptions. For today, I'm going to drag a scriptable task over into the middle. Here we have the green arrow denoting our start and the black circle denoting end. I'm going to go ahead and do the scriptable task right here, and you can change the name on it, so I'm going to call it Test. And down here you can see that I have scriptable tasks are able to take inputs, so that's variables or attributes into it, produce outputs, things that come out of it. There's an exception handling system. There's a visual binding. This is where you can drag inputs and outputs and show them in the screen. And then there's the actual scripting. My resolution is a little bit low on this particular window that I'm using on the hands-on lab. So for me, I like to do a pop-out window. So right here you can do the undock on the scriptable task. That will give you a full screen view of the scriptable task. As you can see, we can now modify the information for just the scriptable task. Now I want to go ahead and put an input in, since I have an attribute that I wanted to drag in. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button to bind. It automatically knows what attributes are available. I'm going to select it and then put it in. I don't have any outputs right now. I don't have any exceptions. Visual binding, you'll see that it automatically created that visual binding for the input I did. The in attribute that came from the external to this particular scriptable task is info, and it's a string, and it's bound to the name info, which is also a string inside of this. Understand that variables that are not passed out as out parameters as part of the solution are lost after the scriptable task runs. Think of it as separate pieces of code. So now we get into the fun part, scripting. A couple items that you want to be aware of when you're working with JavaScript. Number one, JavaScript is case sensitive. It's kind of hard for PowerShell users or Windows users to remember this, but case sensitivity, camel caps, that kind of stuff makes a big difference in vRealize Orchestrator, especially in JavaScript scriptable stuff. Variables are local to your scriptable task unless you make them an input and an output or both. And variables don't have a defined type during creation. They're just pointers to memory locations. You have to actually tell it what kind of variable it's going to be. Errors from the JavaScript are not always helpful. They sometimes point you to the incorrect or offending line. I find that people who are first starting with vRealize Orchestrator, almost always the problem is not on the line you think it is. It's because you have some sort of incorrect case. And you should always validate your input before taking an action. Quite often, if you push from a different workflow into this workflow, some sort of input, output, it gets messy. So let's take a quick look at a very basic output that we can do. So the first thing I learn in all programming languages is how to output to the console so I can actually see what's going on. So we are going to use system.log and do the word message right there, as you can see. And now that I've got that there, I'm going to go ahead and exit it. You'll see that it's already there. Now I can try running this workflow. It has some pretty standard stuff that you'd recommend or see in normal programming languages. You can create breakpoints, so if you want to go step by step when you're debugging, you can do that, or if you just want to run it through and see what it does, you can run it. So as you see, when I run, I get this window over on the side over here. I'm going to go do some minimizing so it's easier to see what's going on. And it tells me what happened. It tells me the status of my variables. So when it came into this whole thing, info was set to Bob. When it came out to the green means it completed successfully, then it's still Bob. That's what it's set to. My log output from my system message is the word message. Let's do a little bit more customizing to make this a little bit more helpful. Go ahead and select that. We're going to do a pop out so we can take a look at it. And now we're going to go ahead and add the variable input. Is that the right name? Oh no, it was info. See how I just went back to check it? Now here's something interesting. If it's a reserved variable that's an input or output, it's going to go pink like that to tell you that you've done the right thing. And we'll put a space there so it doesn't look so bad. And we will go ahead and run it to see what happens. So now you see I have message Bob. That's working exactly like I expected. So now I know how to output information containing the variables and various text. Use a plus sign in between to create more, and you can concatenate as much as you need to and do transformations. So the only challenge I run into is this. Notice the difference between these two. Number one, my IDE is not highlighting it anymore. And number two, I've avoided or missed a case sensitivity of system on the top. Let me go ahead and run this. And we have an error and it says reference system is not defined. See what I mean about not necessarily very helpful in the JavaScript world. Of course, if I do this like that and run it, then you see I have message dog, Bob dog, and message 2. Everything works as expected. So enough about case sensitivity for now, but I wanted to be very careful because you run into a lot of problems. Okay, now that we've got some JavaScript basics out of the way, I'd like to talk about how to use scriptable tasks to pull out valuable information from various objects that you're going to orchestrate via the plugins. Plugins are provided by the creator or manufacturer of the object, or sometimes they're just REST API calls depending on what you're connecting to. Today we're going to use the vCenter plugin, which should be pre-configured and installed and hopefully set up to connect to your vCenter instance. Inside of the editor for a scriptable task, you see a whole bunch of stuff over here on the left where my cursor is right now. These are divided into 3 different things. There are methods. Methods are system calls or plugin calls that generate an object of attributes. For example, when you use in PowerShell the get VM, you get a list of all the virtual machines and a whole bunch of attributes that are associated, like its name, the amount of gigabytes of RAM it has, the number of CPUs, and so on. You also have things that are called attributes. These are specific data elements that are part of those object of attributes or methods. And then you have scripting classes. These are collections of objects and their available methods.